Hello and welcome to another SciFirst MovieTalk episode. My apologies if I do start coughing in the middle of this. I've recently had a sore throat, so I might be prone to that. So please just hang on if I do. But anywho, in this episode, I will be discussing Disney's 1937 animated classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, watched as part of our family film night. The movie is an adaptation of the classic Brothers Grimm fairy tale. It was directed by David Hand, William Cottrell, Wilfred Jackson, Larry Morey, Perce Pierce and Ben Sharpstein, and is actually Disney's very first animated classic. In fact, it's not only was this Disney's very first full-length animated feature, it was also the very first full-length animated feature. At the time, the film was a pinnacle in advancement in animation technique. I believe it introduced a new way of producing an animation which allowed drawings to be, or to have the perspective of depth, which was something which hadn't been achieved prior to the film being made. Animations up to that point had been fairly flat, with no kind of perceived depth. So, in this respect, it's not just a classic, it's the classic. It's the classic of all time. Okay, the animation isn't up to much by today's standards, if you take it as that, but when the film was released, it was absolutely revolutionary and paved the way for Disney to open the door. Well, no, in fact, not just Disney, but for other studios to start looking at animated features in a different light. And from that one leap of faith made by Walt Disney by producing and releasing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the world then never looked back. I mean, the market for animated features today is just enormous. And obviously what spiraled out of Disney's first creation is just nothing short of amazing. And in today's world, an absolute juggernaut of a movie machine. This review also marks another first. It is the first review request I have had since starting SciFirst MovieTalk. And so it is special for me on that basis alone. Hopefully the first of many. So, the film takes the classic Brothers Grimm fairy tale of Snow White and gives it that original Disney twist with some very memorable songs, even for Disney's very first outing, with the likes of Hi Ho and Whistle While You Work having now long since become household favourites. We are introduced to the Queen, Snow White's evil stepmom, who practices dark magic. The Queen is envious of Snow White's beauty and wishes to become the most beautiful in all the kingdom. As such, she hatches a dastardly plot to have Snow White killed. However, the huntsman that she sends to commit this atrocity grows a conscience and can't go through with his orders, instead letting Snow White go and fooling the Queen by presenting her with a pig's heart instead of Snow White's. Snow White then gets lost in the woods in a scene which, for its time, I would suggest was quite frightening. The woods are portrayed as a scary place to begin with monsters and spooky and sinister shapes everywhere she looks. However, in my opinion, this is purely a representation of Snow White's state of mind at the time, sort of being panicked and frightened and alone. Once she has had a chance to calm and collect her thoughts, the sharpness and dark edges of the woods yields to show a series of concerned critters who are intrigued and concerned for Snow White. As it turns out, she has quite the affinity for nature, almost Doolittle-esque. The film portrays an important message we can still all live by even to this day. Sometimes we need to calm down, take a deep breath, and what at first seems scary can often be not what it seems. The animals then lead Snow White to a small cabin in the woods to seek refuge. This, of course, being the home of the Seven Dwarfs. With nobody home, Snow White does the only thing that you can do in that situation: let yourself in and clean the place up, with a little help from her feathered and fairy friends. Now, I'm certainly not going to stop anybody from wanting to step in and clean my house. but perhaps just turning up and doing it on the hoof would be a little bit odd. I certainly wouldn't mind finding some of the animals, though, like those in the film. My house would be spotless. Do watch out for a tortoise during these kind of initial scenes, whose plight to keep up with all of the action is simply hilarious. When the dwarfs return home, they are instantly drawn to help Snow White. Well, that's all bar one. And offer her refuge in their home, where over the course of the night, they come to care for and even love Snow White. However, unbeknownst to them, the Queen has since discovered that Snow White is still alive, and in a livid rage, hatches another diabolical plan to kill Snow White using a disguise as an old peddler selling apples, one of which she has cunningly poisoned. So, I do have to admit that I do find the film a little slow. And in fact, no sooner does the Queen manage to trick Snow White into eating the infamous apple, then the film is pretty much over. It lingers too much for my liking on a number of scenes, as brilliant as they may be on their own, but overall not really moving the story forward, really only serving to show the ever-strengthening bond between Snow White and the dwarfs, but perhaps with too much of a repetitive feel. However, don't get me wrong, the film is still extremely enjoyable and has some very memorable moments, including, but certainly not limited to, the musical numbers such as those mentioned earlier, Whistle While You Work and Hi Ho, which for me have become the staple go-to themes to sing or hum in work when I need to kind of find that little more pep to kind of get me through the day. The dwarfs themselves are quite simply adorable and pretty much steal the show for me. Snow White, I can pretty much take a leave, lightening the mood throughout, with each having their own unique personality suited to their name. So you got Doc, Grumpy, Sleepy, Happy, Bashful, Sneezy, and of course, Dopey. Although absolutely hilarious for the majority of the time they're on screen, I think perhaps some of the comedy surrounding the dwarfs is a bit degrading, however, especially with reference to Snow White. Upon arriving at their house, she wrongly assumes that they are orphan children living there instead of the fact that they're basically indeed a group of old men stuck in their ways. However, Snow White's perception never changes and proceeds to treat the dwarfs as if they are children, telling them they have to wash their hands and telling them when it's time for bed. It's not so much that the fact that this is stated, moreover, it's the way it's conveyed. So, the film in that respect also plays on female-male stereotypes of the era, but I must say they're not quite as bad as they could have been, nor, in fact, as bad as some of the other efforts in later Disney's. Overall, the film, with respect to this, isn't all that offensive, really, given the time period in which it was released. And in fact, Grumpy, who is quite sexist when all is told, does in fact bear the brunt of a series of misfortunes and ribbing from his fellow dwarfs, with a particularly embarrassing comeuppance with a bar of soap and some ribbons. In fact, in the end, even Grumpy warms up to Snow White and is perhaps the saddest of them all to see her lying in the endless sleep. Dopey is, of course, probably most people's favourite, and although his name is quite derogatory when you think about it, if you look closely at some of the things that he does, although yes, he can be quite haphazard, he is actually quite astute and sneaky at times. It's always the quiet ones. The dwarfs also have a fantastic work ethic, which I love, with their two main themes, Dig 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 and Hi Ho, conveying this exceptionally well. Although they do all that work, but it's never really explained what the dwarfs actually do with the gems they mine. Then again, do we not find out that in Lord of the Rings that they like to hoard them? I don't know. So, overall, even though personally I think the film is perhaps a little slow and lacking story, it does have some redeeming features in the form of the dwarfs, who are an absolute treat to watch on screen. And regardless of my own thoughts on the film, one thing I can't deny is just simply that this is one of the most beloved Disneys of all time, and I am sure it will be for many years to come. And, of course, features the true original Disney princess. I've got to certainly appreciate that at the time of its original release, this must have been a spectacle to behold. I mean, even the Gremlins knew about Snow White. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do leave a like, please leave a comment, and of course, please do consider subscribing to this channel, SciFirst MovieTalk, for more movie reviews, movie trailer reactions, other kind of movie-related content, movie gaming episodes, and things like that. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. We do hope to see you again at SciFirst MovieTalk. Goodbye.